Welcome to another episode of Wheel of Horror, the podcast where two best friends spin a wheel once a week. It chooses the horror movie or miniseries, and they discuss it. Today we are talking about 1979's Salem's Lot, which was directed by Tobe Hooper. I'm your co-host, Alec.
This is Joe.
And today is a very special day because not only do we have our first guest ever, but we also, you two are probably like our most frequent guests. Joe, you've obviously slipped into an amazing co-host position while Eric's been on paternity leave. And Dom is back better than ever with a kid now. And you read the Salem's Lot book, so we're here for a nice long comparison. So how's it going, Dom?
Oh man, it's great to be back doing something past, bottle duty and diaper changing. So, and then Joe, man, I'll say up top, I mean, I've listened to a lot of your episodes and it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm a big fan of the slashers and I think you bring some amazing info to all your episodes. I love it.
Oh man, I really appreciate that. And it's great to be here with you. It's great meeting you.
Awesome. This is a big day.
I love it, yeah, because we just had Matt Banniver on recently, too, for War of the Worlds comparison, so Joe got to meet him, and obviously I know you and Matt know each other, Dom, from just life. But yeah, so finally I get to have you guys together. This is awesome, and we're talking about 1979's Salem's Lot. So, Joe, I know you and I have seen the film, or we'll just call it film, many times throughout the years, but Dom, is this your first time seeing it?
This is my first time. Is it like a staple for you guys to watch this?
I don't know. Joe?
Well, for me, I had seen parts of this as a kid, and I feel like it was the right parts. I mean, we'll probably get into it, but there's a few scenes in this movie that once you see them, you can't unsee them. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
But I didn't really see the entire thing until my early 20s. I remember picking up the DVD, and I didn't realize that this was a miniseries, so I don't think I was quite ready for that kind of pacing and the 3-hour runtime. So I wasn't really enamored with it, but I've come back to it in recent years. And, I'm a big fan of like classic horror, gothic horror, Universal Studios, Hammer horror, that kind of stuff. And this really reminds me of that. I just really love the kind of gothic atmosphere. I mean, you give me a full moon and a cemetery and a fog machine and I'm in.
I love live events, but I hate buying tickets. The hidden fees suck, and coordinating with friends is a nightmare. I always end up fronting a bunch of money and then chasing down my friends to get reimbursed. And if they flake, I'm stuck with the whole bill. But then I discovered Fanimal. Fanimal has tickets to everything, and there are no fees. The price you see is the price you pay. Not only are the prices transparent, but they're almost always lower than anywhere else I look. And for any hot tickets, like Lollapalooza, or a Dodgers game, or a weekend concert, Fanimal is always the cheapest option. Nobody goes to live events alone, so why buy tickets alone? Fanimal's patented group purchase makes it easy. First, you set a minimum size for your group, and choose the number of tickets you want to pay for yourself. Then you invite friends. When the minimum size is met, everyone gets charged and receives their tickets. If the minimum size isn't reached in time, nobody gets charged. You don't commit until your friends do. And Fanimal has amazing customer service. Check out their hundreds of 5-star reviews. The next time you need tickets, go to Fanimal.com or download the Fanimal app and sign up with code HORROR for $20 of credit towards your first purchase. Check out Fanimal and experience more. Yeah, it definitely has some of those moments like you were mentioning, like the Nosferatu looking, what's his name, Dom? The
Barlow. So
Barlow, yeah.
Yeah, and the makeup was fantastic. I thought that those contact lenses that make their eyes glow, like those are the times I think, Joe, that's like a really nice comparison to those monster movies, and they have a lot of like all the posters up in Mark Petrie's room. And some of the set pieces, the house in the end, like really impressive. But I'm so curious, like I had never seen this before. And you talk about pacing. It's a really good point. 3 hours. I'm 7 weeks into a newborn baby. So like I'm already kind of struggling with sleep. But if you hadn't read the book, and I'm always realizing that if you read the book, it gives a lot of allowance to any kind of movie. I know what's going on. I don't have to pay attention too much. And you guys have seen this a couple of times, but is it hard to follow?
I don't think so. I don't know why. Like, I mean, even though it's long, you guys are going to hate this. I could have gone for 5 hours on this one. I was totally in. Like, I wanted to see how much, it could affect, because I read that they had basically like lumped characters together to make it shorter and stuff like that. And I was like, I want to see everything about this. So I don't know. I like that it was longer. I didn't mind the pacing. I like the ending. The only thing I'd like more is if they could say fuck. That's probably about it.
Yeah, man. It's interesting. I read the book, right? And then there's also like a short novella called Jerusalem's Lot. And there's a bunch of short stories that are put together in Night Shift. And they both kind of have to do with Salem's Lot and the town, over from them. And a lot of the storylines kind of come together. But to your point, Alec, like they take a lot from the book. And if you like that, then I'm pretty sure you would love the book.
Dude, I mean, yeah. The one major thing that I knew is different is that Barlow is not like this creepy Nosferatu doesn't talk kind of guy. He's also like a suave British like kind of vampire guy. Is that right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Do you think, Joe, they did that because of the makeup and it would make it harder for him to speak?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the reason was. I know that's something the producer and Toby Hooper really wanted. I love that decision. I think Barlow is like one of the most iconic vampires of all time.
Oh, yeah.
And I think maybe, we do have this kind of very eloquent, kind of a Renfield character in Starker. Is that what his name is? Starker, I believe his name is.
Straker, right? Or what is it?
Straker.
Yeah, Straker. So I think, just having another kind of Count Dracula would be, I don't know, I like the idea of giving us something completely different, something more animalistic. This movie is actually coming out the same year as the Frank Langella version of Dracula. And that version is, I don't know which came out first, but that version is, very romantic and suave. And I just love that this movie gives us something completely different.
Well, didn't they remake Nosferatu in 1979?
Oh, that was definitely in the 70s. I'm not sure if it was 1979. It might have been.
Huh. Yeah, dude, I'm just going to say is I think this is actually the scariest vampire. I mean, to me at least, his eyes, his teeth, like I can't think of one that actually terrifies me more.
I agree. And they do a really great job and like the transitions from when people, before they become vampires and then all of a sudden they're vampire self. I like that. And to your point, Joe, like the fog machine budget must have been out of this world because they had it on every scene. It was fantastic.
I mean, for me, the highlight is when the little kid appears at his brother's window. I mean, that is just like burned into my memory from childhood. I feel like it might be one of the most frightening moments in any vampire movie. Usually those moments are very, it's almost like a seduction scene. But this scene is just like pure nightmare fuel.
Yeah, it's somebody that you probably are closer to than anybody in the world. It's not like an all sexual. It's literally just like, that could happen to me. That's going to happen to me right now, and that's my brother. Like, yeah, dude. That scene obviously stands out to everybody, I feel like, when you see this movie.
Dude, 100%. And Alec, I don't know if this shows my age or what, but this reminds me of the Are You Afraid of the Dark, where the little boy comes to the window who's very cold.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know what it is. It's just something that I'm sure that they took this as inspiration, but isn't that Rob Lowe?
In Are You Afraid of the Dark?
No, in this. Like the little boy, the older brother.
No. He's in the remake.
I think it is.
Yeah, he's in there's a early 2000s miniseries that he's in.
No way. I'm so glad I didn't watch that instead.
he plays the David Soul character in the remake.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
I've never seen either of these, so I don't know. And I'm curious as to like the transition from like a Starsky and Hutch to like a mini series like this, whether it was like, well, Hutch is really hot right now, we're going to put him into something new, or if he advocated for this.
Well, I think he actually did a movie about a year before where it was very similar. Like he was like a vampire hunter. So I think maybe somebody saw him in that. I'm trying to look it up right now. The Stick Up, maybe? No. Oh, shit. I had heard that he had acted in a vampire film. Oh, wait, here it is. Little Ladies of... I don't know what I'm talking about. But anyways, he was in a movie. Maybe that's where they saw him. But you're probably right. Yes, he probably was very hot from Starsky and Hutch.
Oh, yeah.
Could we rewind a bit and go back to Mark Petrie's room? Because whenever there's a room like this in a horror movie, I just absolutely love it because I tried to create like a horror museum in my room growing up. So when things like this pop up in movies, like there's a really great kids bedroom in Creepshow that we talked a little bit about, and also there's another great one in Tobe Hooper's next movie, which hopefully me and you will talk about soon, Alec. The Funhouse.
Oh, I think I said Poltergeist. I was like, yeah, the kids' room's cool.
Yeah, actually that room isn't bad either. But yeah, like this room is just completely decked out in like the old Universal Monsters model kits, and he's got this awesome poster of the Wolfman. I just loved it so much.
Oh, Joe, I love the way they framed the window with the Wolfman up on the left. It looks so good in the dark. And it's from the story that Mark has all of these toys and models, and like it's how he survives the first vampire coming through, kind of very much like they do in the miniseries. But yeah, they did a fantastic job, I really thought. And I'm like, Mark, you got a pretty big room, man. Growing up, I did not have that kind of square footage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that it's his knowledge of horror movies that helps him survive. I mean, I would have loved that as a kid. I would have loved this character because he even is very proactive at the end. Like he tells Barlow, I'm going to kill you. And he goes up to the haunted house, by himself with a couple of stakes, and he's going to get shit done. I really like this character.
Yeah, he was awesome. But also educating yourself on vampires, the older teacher guy, I love that scene where he's reading about what vampires are, and he says to that one, I think his name is Mark, the guy that gets bit, like the middle-aged guy that gets bit, but he's like, I rescind my invitation to you, you must leave. So he's like using the knowledge from limited vampire experience that he probably has.
Yeah, in the book, he's like a bigger, he's like a Van Helsing, and that whole period where he's housing that Mike Ryerson up in his house, right? It's really, he's a much stronger character in the book, and when he realizes what's going on with the guy upstairs and that he might be a vampire, he starts to really panic. And, I know that Hutch stepped into this role, so there was a certain amount of like character and charisma that he brought to it because of like who was playing it. But Ben Mears in the book is like a more level-headed guy, and when he shows up, there's a lot of discussions, and that was the first time in the book where you see that like the teacher starts to get really frazzled. And I mean, it makes more sense kind of in the context of the book, of the heart attack situation. But I think what I liked a lot about the book is that it really gives you some time to get to know, like, so when you guys were watching the movie, let me ask you about this. And I don't want to jump ahead too far, but like, so I like what you were saying, Joe, where they have Stryker be like a very charismatic, and he speaks for Barlow. But did it throw you off when he was able to kind of like find like super strength, or the fact that he can like abduct people? Like, do you guys get bogged down in like, okay, so what exactly are vampires' powers? They can make dishes fly off the wall, or like they didn't do too much to kind of really cement the rules of like inviting people in, and they just kind of hint at it, which I like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't get too bogged down in too much of the rules and the minutia. That scene at the end where he throws the guy through the antlers, it did come as a surprise that he had this superhuman strength. I was actually thinking a lot about Fright Night.
Yes.
During that scene, because he also, there's a Renfield character in that movie that is shot on the stairs and dies on the stairs, and then they move into the basement. I was thinking a lot about Fright Night in the
Me too, dude.
final moments of this movie. But yeah, I just kind of chalked it up as he's somewhere in the middle. He's somewhere in transition. Like he can still move about by day, but maybe he has some vampire blood in him.
See, I took it as exactly like that character from Fright Night, where it's like he's the Watcher. So like, I don't think he's a vampire, but I don't know. They definitely do something to him where he has strength. He can take bullets just like that guy in Fright Night. But you think he might be like a transitional vampire?
Something like that. Yeah, I mean, again, I didn't give it too much thought, but I was thinking like maybe Barlow feeds him a little bit of his blood, and that gives him strength, but he's not quite a vampire yet.
He's the British Blade.
Exactly. I was thinking something like that. To tell you the truth, I wasn't thinking all that much about it.
Dom, do they get into that in the book at all?
Oh, they sure do. Yeah. So in the book, he's like a muscle guy. He like gets he definitely is a British like smooth talker, right? Those scenes between him and the constable really do happen. but he's a guy who like, so he goes to kidnap Mark, and you know how Mark gets tied up in the attic, right? When him and Susan are brought into the house. So Mark escapes, right? Like he does in the movie. And when Barlow finds out, like, so they leave the house completely, right? Ben's not with them. When they leave the house, he leaves Susan behind because she's in the basement. He tries to rescue her, and as he goes down, the sun goes down, and Barlow wakes up, and you can hear Susan screaming for Mark, and then she gets taken. So when Barlow finds out that Stryker let Mark leave, he pins him up by his feet and cuts his throat, so he bleeds down over his face as he's suspended from the door frame. So it's like, and they come back to kill Barlow, and they find the body, and they're like, "Why did you do that to him?" And he's like, "You guys forced me. I've held him in such high regard. He's been such a loyal servant, and like him losing like the kid, I had to kill him in that way." It's brutal.
Wow. Salem's Lot, the novel, is definitely probably the next King book I'm going to jump into. I've been kind of working my way through King in just a completely random order. Believe it or not, I have read Jerusalem's Lot because I'm working my way through Night Shift right now. So I've read that, but I haven't read Salem's Lot, and I really can't wait to read it. It's crazy that, this is King's second novel, and already there's like so many Stephen King staples that we would see sort of constantly in so many of his other stories, like, just a small New England town with like a dark past and a haunted house, and the protagonist's a writer. I mean, just so many things that Stephen King would go back to.
Oh, 100%. And it's really cool because this is such a big jump. Like, I loved Carrie, but there's something he does really well when there's multiple perspectives within the same either experience or within the same time period. So we having all those different characters, like that's something that he gets really into. He does that in a lot of his novels. I bring it up on every podcast we talk about Stephen King, but this is the first book of his in like chronological order that I think like, okay, he's found something, and it really shifts up a gear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the huge cast of characters too is something that I associate with King, and just people in the suburbs and their dirty little secrets is also kind of a little King flourish. Yeah. So like I was thinking also the antique store reminded me so much of like Needful Things.
Oh, 100% like Needful Things.
Well, to this point, Dom, maybe you could answer this just while we're talking about like Stephen King around this time. So it went Carrie, Salem's Lot, The Shining, right? Those were his first three like full novels?
Yep.
Dude, I noticed something. All three of those movies end in a big fire.
Oh.
So Carrie, she lights the auditorium on fire. Salem's Lot, they light the Marston house on fire. In the book of The Shining, they light the hotel on fire.
Hotel explodes, yeah. And you're absolutely right. And in it, there's a big fire in the past that, like, I mean, it's not as big of a plot point, but I'm sure it's in a bunch of his other novels. So to your point, Joe, like he has these staples, and it's funny because a lot of people accuse him of being, someone who just, well, for lack of a better term, he jacks off, and people, like he masturbatory or whatever writing. But I'll say, like, you can that's what people say. I love the idea that he not only does he have different perspectives within these small New England towns, but like some of them are detestable, and they have such raw stories. Like in the book, obviously they get further in it, and some of the couples that like get, eventually they become vampires. They start off and they're detestable. There's this a guy and his wife, and they have a newborn baby, and like she is the worst mother, right? She ignores the baby, she beats the baby. So like by the time all this stuff is going down in Salem's Lot, you're ready for them to like have something terrible and fantastical happen to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Going back to just these early King stories, I was just thinking about how much talent, King movies had in the director's seat. Like you had Brian De Palma doing Carrie, Tobe Hooper here, hot off Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Kubrick next, and even into the early 80s.
Shit.
You got Cronenberg, you got Carpenter. It gets a little hit or miss as the 80s go on. But man, I mean, he could have done a lot worse.
Yeah, you're right.
100%. I feel like King just provided all of this horror content, and like, the 70s and the 80s were, people directing were doing some fantastic things in terms of horror. So like the idea that those two coincided, that time period where people were being more excited about directing and producing horror, and then the time where like Stephen King is putting out these one-off stories that are perfect for movies or TV shows.
Yeah, it was like a golden age, really. And getting back to Toby Hooper, I'm just really impressed with what he accomplished in this movie because don't forget, we're talking about a TV miniseries, and I'm sure like standards and practices were keeping a close eye on, how much violence could be in this, how much bloodshed, and there really isn't that much. And I think he finds really interesting ways to keep things scary without getting gruesome. We talked about that iconic scene where the kid's at the window. There's also that very creepy scene where the gravedigger opens the coffin and the kid's just sitting there with his eyes open. Honestly, almost as scary as the window scene. So I just give Toby Hooper a lot of props.
And with all those limitations, what's happening. To your point, like when they're killing Barlow in the end, they can't obviously show gore or anything happening when Ben is hammering the stake into Barlow's chest. But you have Mark on the ground, out of focus. The vampires are crawling from the crawl space toward him. Like they're really building tension without doing anything too gruesome or too over the top for a television series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I thought that scene was fantastic. And the scene where Barlow shows up in the kitchen, there's like this poltergeist activity, and then the window breaks and they just see a black cape on the ground that he just like emerges out of. I mean, it's just really, really clever stuff. And I mean, if you think about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, though, there wasn't really any gore in that movie either. I mean, it has a reputation because it's so intense, and its title implies that there's this gruesome violence in the movie. But actually, through most of his career, or at least a lot of his career, he was pretty good at the subtle stuff.
He's so good at having you fill in the blanks and just like having the horror, I don't know, like almost write itself in your mind for you. But yeah, I really, that scene, Joe, you mentioned earlier where everything's just shaking and then all of a sudden you just see the figure on the floor. Like that is so terrifying. And he kills the parents in front of their child. Like this is CBS in the 70s. Like that's pretty intense. I also thought that the freeze frames when they killed people were actually kind of effective. I like that at first, and then it got a little cheesy, but
yeah, you could always tell when, they're cutting to commercial, which is unfortunate, but hey, it is what it is. That's why it helps to know that this movie was a miniseries going in.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Bard's Clothing. The days of "Hi, my name is" are over. We live in a virtual world, and our images are being shared on social media and professional pages every day. With over 1,000 fabrics to choose from, Bard's Clothing is here to tell your story through clothing. Make sure the image you want people to have of you is the one you're sending, because by the time you get face-to-face, their minds might already be made up. Quality clothing all made here in America. Head on over to www.bardsclothing.com or follow them on Instagram @bardsclothing.
And, I don't know if you guys have ever played like the early Resident Evil games where they have the fixed camera at one end of the hallway and the character makes their way toward it. But I'm wondering, is that inspired by some of the shots in this? Like there's definitely a lot of instances where characters will make their way from where the camera is to the other end, and they won't change angles until the characters walk through the door, right? And then, something that was really interesting about how the shots lasted really long. At first, I'm like, oh, maybe it's network TV. They're trying to fill up some time, which may very well happen. But then there's moments like when Danny floats in through the window. And, part of what makes it so creepy is they don't cut. And the floating is nice and consistent. There's no flinching. And they really let you sit. There's no music really flooding through. It's just oddly quiet.
Yeah, the way they accomplished this, I'm not even positive how they accomplished this, but I heard Toby Hooper talk of it a little bit. And there was this harness, like he wasn't hanging from strings. You could see him enter the window, which would have been impossible if he was just hanging from strings. He was in this harness, and there was like a crane behind him that could just kind of move him back and forth. And then on top of that, they shot it in reverse, so it has this very like dreamlike quality to it. I mean, it's really amazing.
Yeah, I was looking so hard for the wires, and I was like, God damn! Like I was like, maybe it's just blending in with the smoke, but I was like, no, I literally can't see it. So yeah, they tricked me. Mm-hmm. They made a sequel called Return to Salem's Lot. It was just a film sequel, but there really is potential here for more of David Soul and the younger kid's character here. I mean, they could go back to Salem's Lot. Clearly, the vampires are hunting them still, but apparently the sequel doesn't focus on that at all. Do you guys know anything about the sequel?
I explored the entire Salem's Lot multiverse last fall, so I can speak a little bit about the sequel and the Rob Lowe remake. You know, I kind of avoided Return to Salem's Lot. It doesn't have a good reputation. It's a sequel in name only. It really has nothing to do with this movie, but it is just kind of a fun drive-in movie. Like it was directed by Larry Cohen. He did these kind of like grindhouse movies. So if you go in expecting just kind of a fun time that has nothing to do with this movie, I think you can enjoy it. And then the remake, which was also a miniseries, not bad. I think it gets by with a really good cast. In that movie, you have Donald Sutherland as Straker and Rutger Hauer as Barlow, a more like kind of traditional Count Dracula version of Barlow. So I actually think it's worth checking out, but neither of them can compare to this one, in my opinion.
I remember watching the miniseries in high school, and I remember that scene with James Cromwell where he's like the priest, and he's like, renounce your faith, and he's like, I believe in you now, master. And I was like, this is scary. Like, it actually got me. But the Return to Salem's Lot, I never saw it, but still, like, I think there really was potential here for a sequel. Like those two characters together now, like, I don't know. I would love to keep watching them, and I was upset when it was over.
Yeah, that's how the book ends, So like the book ends that they go back. They choose to go back. So they kind of, the way it starts is how the book starts, where they're out in Guatemala, and there's a church that I think that Ben and Mark have escaped to, and they're hiding out. But at some point, Mark gives confession. And he's feeling so guilty because they left this whole town behind after this whole ordeal, and his guilt is eating him up. So like him and Ben like load up and they head back to like kill all the vampires. Like they had taken out Barlow, and in the movie they have Susan at the end of the movie where she finds them and he has to choose to stake her. But in the book, Barlow knows that they're coming to try to kill him. So instead of him being there, he leaves Susan out in the coffin and just leaves her there for them to find. So they show up and they have to kill her. And Barlow knows, like from a mind game perspective, that that's going to fuck with them, right? And they're not going to want to keep going. So he's just playing with them, and it really tears Ben up. Just like you said, Alec, they combine a lot of characters. Like, so Susan's dad is not the doctor in the book, right? There's another doctor, and he dies in a similar way. But, instead of being put onto the wall, how that stair, when they go to the cellar, there's no stairs there, and Mark kind of falls to his face.
Yeah.
In the book, there's a bunch of knives there. So Mark and Dr. Cody, who's from the book, they go to kind of find Barlow, and Dr. Cody steps first and he falls just like Mark did, except he falls into a bunch of knives, and that's how he dies.
Oh shit.
Whoa. Yeah. I would love King to do a follow-up to this, kind of like he did with The Shining all those years later. But I don't know if you've read any of the Dark Tower stuff, Dom. I've only read the first novel, but from what I understand, some characters do return later in the Dark Tower books.
Yep, Father Callahan. Yeah, I've gone through all the Dark Tower books, which is I can tell you there was one summer, Joe, where I literally had audiobooks, and we were traveling or something, so I literally went through in order. And the Dark Tower series pulls characters from all different kind of Stephen King, and if you do it in order, it makes all sense. You just seen those characters in stuff like Hearts from Atlantis and Insomnia. There's all these different characters that come and return back in. But I can imagine if it's spaced out like King wrote it, over 20, 30, 40 years, it'd be hard to keep track of all of that. I was in a very unique position, and you're absolutely right. They do bring characters back in, so I can highly encourage you to keep reading those books, and like, it's fantastic. I don't know. I'm a big fan, obviously.
Yeah, no, I definitely intend to. I just wanted to say about this movie that I was really impressed with just how the movie looked. You could tell it was just kind of shot on film, and it didn't scream TV movie. And it reminded me that this kind of started this tradition of the Stephen King event miniseries that I remember well as a kid. I don't really remember the first It miniseries when it was on TV. I was a bit young for that, but I do remember the Tommyknockers really well, and The Stand, and the Shining remake. So this kicked off, I mean, countless like Stephen King TV movies and miniseries. And this actually, I feel like, is less dated than a lot of those. I've revisited a few of those. A bunch of them are on YouTube, some of the ones from when I was a kid. And let me tell you, this holds up a lot better.
Well, now that we're almost 50 years from Carrie, we're getting to that point. What do you guys think? Do you think the miniseries work better for Stephen King novels? I mean, especially you, Dom, you'd have such a good insight on this. Or do you think the films work better?
I mean, I think it depends on who makes the film. Like there are some Stephen King films that are, they're not necessarily horror. Like I love Green Mile. Shawshank's a novella, so it's a short story. But they, some people take that material and, because he's had such a long career and he's has so much work in different areas, like you forget just how much he's written. And I don't know, if I were someone trying to bring a story to life, like he would be the kind of author that I would be circling.
Yeah. Have you guys seen Midnight Mass? Because that's a Netflix series that actually reminded me a lot of Salem's Lot. And Mike Flanagan, who created that series, is a huge King fan and has worked on a bunch of King projects. Have you guys seen that?
I have not.
No, I haven't even heard of it, actually.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm definitely worth checking out. Yeah.
Something to check out, yeah. Well, just before we wrap up here, I actually had a question, Dom, for you. So they mention in the movie that they're like, I bet they've been doing this for centuries. They've been going, whatever, from small town to small town, doing this forever. But the whole reason this all gets started is because Ben has this, like, dream or whatever to go back to the Marston house, which used to be haunted. So is the haunting at the Marston house and this vampire thing just totally unrelated? Like, why was the town being, like, sort of haunted by a ghost house, but then all of a sudden a vampire just moves in? Like, it just kind of seems weird that they're, like, unrelated.
Yeah, they are related. It's kind of a convoluted thing where the guy in the Marston house used to have, he did like a devil worship, and he was the one who recommended the town to Barlow. So somehow they got into contact. And the whole thing, they mention it in the miniseries, is like, he has this famous where he kills his wife with a shotgun and then he hangs himself. And Hutch gives a very powerful, we'll say, monologue about Ben Mears in the book. And like he shows up and, he feels this, he keeps saying like, it's just like a monument of evil. But the whole thing is like this guy that killed himself, he does this like worship and this devil worship. And Joe, like I don't know how far you've gotten into Jerusalem's Lot, like the short story, but it kind of talks about like the worship of the, like, the satanic worship underneath the church. Have you gotten into it?
Oh yeah, I finished the story.
Okay. Yeah. So it's kind of, they talk about like before Alec, where like this town, for whatever reason, is like a hub of evil. And they there's a lot of history of people like worshiping this worm. It's like this evil creature, but it's like a tuning fork for evil.
A worm?
Yeah, there's this big worm. It's like a big like monster down beneath, like hidden underground.
It's like Pennywise.
And very H.P. Lovecraft.
Yes, absolutely. But anyway, so like, they talk about the history of that town, and they talk about in the book how Barlow would avoid things like cities, right? Because like it's too hard to kind of achieve like taking over a town where there's too many people, or there's too much attention on the day to day. But it's it's a loose connection, and they talk about it. And if I was probably well rested, I could remember it, but I am blanking.
No, trust me. That's I want to pick this book up so bad.
It's worth it, man. I would totally advise.
Before we wrap up here, guys, do you have any other thoughts on Salem's Lot?
As of this recording, there was supposed to be a remake coming out next month, I believe, but
Yeah,
it has been delayed to I don't know when, but I don't know anything about it, but maybe we should all get together once it finally comes out.
Oh, I'd be happy to.
100%. Yeah, I think it's coming out next year now because there hasn't even been a trailer, so it's like there's no way. I mean, I don't know.
Mhm.
How about you, Dom? Any last minute thoughts?
No, I thought that this was super interesting. I like when things are time capsules. I don't know, like there was something about the reason that it didn't feel so dated is because they didn't do too much to hide the era that it took place in. So there was a lot of like scenery shots, and there was something special about this that captured what it was like to live in the late 70s, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I feel the way with a lot of Stephen King's movies.
And especially the guy from Anchorman, what's his name?
Oh, Fred Willard.
Yes.
I mean, his fashion, some of his suits are just incredible.
They're so incredible. I was like, I want that jacket for sure.
That scene was pretty intense for network TV with Fred Willard getting like the shotgun put up to him and stuff. You're like, Jesus, but hey, they pulled it off.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, everybody, thank you so much for listening to our episode today on Salem's Lot. If you haven't had a chance yet, we released our episode on The Requiem on Friday, which was a horrible movie, so if you want to listen to that, check it out. Dom, thank you so much for always being our Stephen King expert, reading the book, such a time commitment and filling us all in on the differences. So thank you so much again for joining.
It's great, man. And the last podcast was literally right before my daughter was born. And I'm sure I'm going to listen to this in the future. And it's just like, and just remember how fucking nuts I am right now.
Well, that's part of the reason we do it, man. Just remember, be like, oh yeah, remember that time we did this? And, yeah, I don't know. But anyways, what do you say we spin the wheel, Joe?
Let's do it.
All right, spinning. All right, right back up your alley, Joe. We got Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2.
All right. Yeah, I think I've seen that one.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited to talk about that one. I got to talk to Eric because he wants to do this one so bad. So hopefully maybe we can get him to jump on too.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
But Dom, thank you so much. Joe, as always, thank you so much, dude. You've just been such a huge help through all this process and really can't thank you enough. Everybody else, thank you so much for listening in, and we will see you all next week with Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge.
Later.
Later, guys.